Alright, so in this video I just wanted to run through exactly what I believe to be the best kind of optimal strategy in terms of XP. Should you be buying new season cards? Should you be sticking with old season cards? Is it a little bit in the middle? I'll give a kind of conclusion for now. It is not a one size fits all. It's not this is the best answer. It's very much it depends on a multitude of factors. But my kind of general rule of thumb will follow my calculations here. It is a little bit complicated, but at the same time, I'll try and make it as simple as possible, and I've got a spreadsheet to follow, so I hope that helps. So starting off very basic, if you need to know the XP formula, it's on screen for you here. Essentially, it's a base XP plus the amount of minutes your teams play, plus the player's score combined, right? So a team score. And there is little multipliers on this. So, base XP to start with are just 75. You can't get less than that, even if none of your players play. And then it is 75 times the average amount of minutes played throughout the team divided by 90. And then the player score is your team score times by 0.125. And that's how much each kind of player would get. I then broke these scenarios down and just gave kind of realistic expectations, strong expectations, and worst case expectations. So starting with the easiest to understand, the worst case is that you get your base 75 XP, none of your cards play, and none of them make any score because none of them played. In that case, 75 XP should be pretty easy to understand. The next one, I've gone for a realistic midweek expectation. So in this, I've taken a base score of 75 and I've added the team playing an average of 35 minutes. Now this could be considered low, but what I wanted to account for here was the fact that some cards will go out and play 90 minutes, whereas midweeks when it's quiet, you won't be having players score at all. You'll have plenty of DMPs mixed in there. So I wanted to make that as realistic as possible and therefore kind of undervalued it slightly and put the score of 175. If you think 3 players, 175 is quite reasonable, especially if they're common cards, because that is what a lot of people have in their training lineups. It's all important to note this XP grows on training lineups and normal lineups that you're competing to win cards with, right? I just wanted to make sure people understand that there's no quicker way. They grow exactly equal if you were to score the same points in each, but important point to note. And then the realistic weekend. So in this case, I've taken an average of 70 minutes because this is for the entire year. So yes, your player could play every week. Yes, they could play 90 minutes every week. But in that case, there's a DMP, or in that case, they've subbed off in the 85th minute. Across a year, that would average down slightly less. 70 could be argued on the slightly high side, but I thought if you could argue the realistic midweek is slightly low and the realistic midweekend is slightly high, they balance out to a realistic scenario. And that would give you a total of 170 points. And a strong case, I just want to kind of see how factors would change based on a strong case scenario. So in this case scenario, you're averaging 80 minutes because, like I said, across a whole year, you can't average a whole team playing 90. It's near impossible. And then an average score of 330 across a year, which if you're playing really good Sorare, I think is possible. And that gives you an XP bonus of 182. Why these numbers are then important is because you take them in a cumulative XP, so you add them together every week to get your score. If I scroll to the right here, you can see where your kind of score lines up, but essentially from 0 XP to 99, you'll get 0%. From 100 XP to 199, you get 0.5%, and it grows continually until you get 10%. Now, if you're a little bit confused and you're thinking, well, I've seen cards over 10% XP, how does that happen? It's because this doesn't include the new season 5% XP. So you start on that and you have it until the new season cards get minted, right? So essentially you have it for a year is the kind of assumption I've made on this, because in a realistic scenario, we have no idea when Sorare are going to bring out old new season card mints. They can be delayed for a number of factors that no one knows about. So in fairness, a year is the best expectation. Of course, we've had examples of like Zenit, where the whole league's not getting minted and the XP grows stronger and stronger. We're ignoring that for now. We're making a basic assumption that every single year the XP grows, and that's what I'll be using for whether the 5% is worth it or not. Another point to note here is that although you can have midweeks and weekends playing consistently, I did think it was more balanced to adding a scenario where no one plays. You're in a training team and just no one's scoring at all. So I think it's every 8 weeks maybe. Yeah, every 8 weeks I added the fact that, the whole team just gets a base of 75. So I was looking at kind of 5 scenarios of a 0% start, a 2% start, 4%, 6%, 8% start. What that means is the kind of XP that you're starting on compared to your new season cards. And I thought it was a little complicated, so I made a new sheet that explained it slightly more clearly. So in game week 1, at the end of game week 1, if you had a card with 0% XP and you had a realistic midweek or weekend, it would go to 0.5%. 2% would stay at 2%, 4% would stay at 4%, 6% would stay at 6%, 8% would stay at 8%. But in the final scenario, it's obviously a new season card where you get your 5% plus the extra. So in this case, by the end of game week 1, you would have 5.5%. And when we think of these cards, it's actually very difficult to get a card on 8% at the floor, because most people have held these cards for so long that they're going to continue, and they're definitely going to hold them in most case scenario, right, for the first, 8 to 9 weeks, where they have a bigger advantage than any card on the platform, right? So that's what I've considered here. And it's like, okay, up to the first 8 game weeks, you can see that the old season card has the bonus, and then beyond that, the new season card has a bonus. But I don't think it's fair just to say who's winning how many weeks. I think what you want to count is the difference, right? The difference between how much is a new season card versus an old season card benefiting. Because in these scenarios, 0.5% isn't really much. But towards the end of the season, if I just scroll down, if you imagine there's 52 weeks, so 104 in a year, right? You're getting up to your 13% compared to 10, a 3% bonus. And this is one of these objective points where it's, wishy-washy, because if you're competing for no rewards or tier 3s, the difference between getting a tier 3 and finishing 690th, or a tier 3 adding 3%, finishing 670th, you're never really going to realise that difference. So this is where, in the debate of new season cards versus old season cards, you need to think yourself, how competitive actually am I? Where can I finish? Because the movement of 3% moving me from second to first, it will be worth every single day of the week. If you could finish in second or first every week, you would buy the best season cards every single time. But that's not realistic, obviously. So, I thought the best case scenario is that you sum these up in year 1 and you sum these up in year 2. So when you sum them up in year 1, the new season cards have a bonus of 181%, or if you take 40 games per season, 4% per game. The reason it gets very hard to quantify, though, is because you can't just divide this and say, per 40 games, you're going to get 4.5% bonus. Because like I've already shown, in none of these scenarios do you have an over 4.5% bonus. So it is quite tricky how you would actually put this into a number of how much you should go out and spend, or how much you should pay in addition. And of course, like I already said, it depends how high up the leaderboard you're competing. But if you think the first year, the new season cards have a bonus of 181%, and in the second year, they have a disadvantage of minus 65%. And here, some people would be arguing that, okay, well, in the third year, the old season cards will also have a bonus. Although that's probably true, not only do I think this gap would narrow quite substantially because of the exponential graph of it, I think the bigger problem would be making an assumption 3 years in advance on Sorare isn't really realistic. It's like, in that case scenario, someone like Mukoku of Dortmund would be the most expensive player on the game, because you would take into account his next 10 years, when realistically, you're focusing on the here and now is a much better play, because you don't know what the future looks like. There could be changes to XP. They could, the platform could completely fall apart. The platform can completely redesigned where, none of this is essentially the same as it is now. So in the first 2 years, it's 181% bonus, or a minus 65%, netting off to 116% bonus throughout an entire season. So for me, this is why I always lean towards new season cards are better. Because on a general kind of balance, I think that new season cards adding that kind of 181% across one whole year will make you a return if you're competing at the top end for what I would call a better scenario than a year 2 slight benefit. And these points get a bit more substantial when you consider a 2% card, which I think is more likely closer to the floor. Then you'd get a 484% bonus across the whole season, or a minus 6.5% across the second season, which is, essentially negligible. A big problem lies, though, on something I have no idea how to calculate, and that's the opportunity cost. If you're spending 0.2 ETH to get better XP cards, which win you better rewards, what else could you have been doing with that 0.2 ETH? And this is where I said at the very beginning of the episode, there is no one correct answer. It's very much, and it depends on your scenario. But if you don't know what you're doing and you can compete at the top end, my default scenario is to buy the new season cards. Don't go overboard. 10%, in my personal opinion, I'd snap up that offer. 15%, I'd consider it. 20%, oh, that's kind of hard. 25% above, nah, that's not for me. But these numbers are almost entirely made up because I don't know how many times I'll be in the rewards for a season. I don't know how many times 3% will have an effect, because you've got to think 3% might never move you in the leaderboard. You might get an extra 3% and you stay in the same place. That's completely possible. But as time goes on, the leagues and the competition will grow. There'll be more people competing, and that'll push the scores together. And it's obviously going to push them up, as we've already seen. So adding extra 3%, 4% could be absolutely crucial. That's kind of my perspective on it. I've been meaning to do this video for a while, so I really hoped it helped you. Obviously, it's boring getting into the numbers, but it can be it can give you such a competitive advantage over everyone else. Let me know what you did think in the comments. Let me know if this has changed your opinion or you stay the same opinion. All the best to you, and thanks for watching. Cheers.